Um, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to have you all with us. We are going to have a very interesting discussion on independent directorship. It's a tightrope walk, in my opinion, and definitely more a bed of thorns than a bed of roses. And before I, introduce the panelists, the very esteemed panelists that I have, and the very capable co-moderator that I have along with me, I would like to brief you a little bit on what we're going to have today. What has happened in the past couple of years is that top professionals have taken up this responsibility of being an independent director with great amount of zeal and trying to contribute their valuable time to uplift the corporation, the organization that they're going to be a part of, or they're part of, or they want to be a part of. But what has happened is that a couple of judgments, both from the High Courts and the Apex Court and the regulatory regime, has made it almost claustrophobic for the independent directors to function, should I say, not effectively, but I should say smoothly and without any pressure on their head. In as much as the pressures that these top individuals and professionals face in their own personal lives and vocations, they're trying to give their time to the organization, and the last thing that they want is to be saddled with any liability for which they are certainly not responsible. And lawyers can make a mayhem out of interpretations of the regulatory regime, the current provisions of the Companies Act or the LODR, which is the listing obligations and disclosure requirements of the SEBI, and have a field day, indulging in intellectual gymnastics. But what happens to that independent director who is unfortunately caught in the loop of an unwanted litigation? Now, that is something which we are going to debate and discuss more so. And we hope that we have a very fruitful and an educative enterprise, because here at IMC, we try to reform, reboot, and research. So that being the motto, let's hope that we have a very productive discussion. And with that, first, I would like to introduce my co-moderator, Radhika Dudat. She's a partner with Shardul Amarchand Mangaldas, and she's going to help me out in this. In fact, both of us have curated the questions and everything together. And this seminar is, let's say, a baby of ours as such in terms of corporate indulgence. She chairs the corporate law committee of the IMC, and I chair the policy committee. So according to me, this is a part, should I say, of corporate policy in that sense. Now, going to the three panelists that we have. The first one that I would like to talk about or introduce to all of you is Mr. Vikesh Walia. Now, Vikesh Walia has got a very enviable record, and I know Vikesh since quite some time. He's a former board member of the Times of India Group and the current board member of the National Governing Council Institute of Directors. He's a resident editor of Director Today. It's a beautiful magazine, by the way. I get all those issues regularly. He's also the executive committee member of Council for Fair Business Practices, and he's the founder and editor at Board Stewardship Inc. He's an alumnus of Pondicherry University and IMA, and also Cranfield University at the United Kingdom, and also Wharton. He's based in Mumbai. He's a speaker at Premier B Schools. He has hosted about training programs for over 1,000 existing and aspiring board directors. So I think, what I would suggest is, to the government, as and when we bring out a white paper on the independent directors, is that, you might as well rope in Vikesh to, help you out in drafting anything that is required or curating anything that is required pertaining to independent directors. And I will want to say that for both the remaining my panelists as well. But let me complete Vikesh's biodata here. And, he regularly talks abroad as well on these issues. So he's got a very comparative knowledge of independent directorship, both here, domestic, in India, and abroad as well. My second guest today, panelist, is Mr. Nagesh Pinge. Now, Nagesh is an expert in ethics, corporate governance, risk management, and internal audit. He's also a chartered accountant and law graduate. Now, that's a very, very deadly combination to have, because not only are you very well versed with the basics of the law, but being a chartered accountant, that helps you in a lot many things, and certainly an asset to any company that you are. He also has completed his executive education program from the Ross School of Business, the University of Michigan, and he's the past president of the Institute of Internal Auditors. Now look at his board directorships. I mean, he's worked with many organizations of repute. He retired from Tata Motors as Chief Internal Audit, Risk Management and Ethics. He was also at Reliance earlier in JSW Steel, and also worked for ICICI as the Chief Risk Officer. And he's been an independent director on multiple boards, and he's got an ACIIA award, that is the Asian Confederation of Institutes of Internal Audit. And he's also currently an independent director on Aditya Birla, Sun Life Insurance, Utkarsh Small Finance, Hero Housing, Goa Carbon, Arvind Lifestyle, and Arvind Fashion. So I think that sums it pretty much for Nagesh as to what sort of an answers and what sort of a discussion that we await. Now let me introduce to you the third panelist. It's Smita Afinwala. Smita's career spans for about 34 years between the financial services industry and human resources. She's held leadership positions in both the fields, and she's currently the founder and managing director of Illuminos Consulting Private Limited. It's a consulting firm focused on enhancing organizational and individual performance. And she's also a business partner, this is her firm rather, of Cerebyte Inc. in India and the Middle East. She's served on several boards, including Mudra and HDB Financial Services, which is the largest subsidiary of HDFC Bank. And she also serves on several advisory boards and industry associations. Now, with that sort of a background that we have, let me, it's going to be very difficult for me, to moderate with all these three people, because, somewhere I'll have to combine the knowledge that these three people have with whatever little knowledge I have of, the corporate governance and company law. Although, I, tout myself as a corporate lawyer, but I'm not so sure when facing these three high-class individuals, where I stand. But anyway, let me begin with Vikesh first. And Vikesh, my very simple basic question to you is that how important do you think is the role of independent directors today in any corporate institution? Vikesh, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Smita, so can you? Smita, Nagesh,
yeah.
Unmute.
Well, Swapnil, today, this is the most critical position in the board. Although every member in the board is equal, but independent directors get a position, get a respect, which is even higher than that of the chairman. So therefore, the position of independent directors is very critical. It is very important, and it enjoys a certain respect from other board members, and the entire community of stakeholders looks up to them. And that is the kind of importance they enjoy, and they really have that role to play.
Nagesh, what do you have to say on this?
I feel that as an independent director, on a standalone basis, we are probably expecting too much from that one person. He is an integrated part of the entire board. And I think he has to gel well with his other buddies who are the other independent directors. Then at the same time, he has to also gel well with the non-executive directors and the non-executives and these non-independent directors. And then at the same time, he has to also gel with the rest of the people. So I think this is all a part of his ability to settle down in a sort of a DNA that he has been thrown by that organization. And he then has to keep on creating right kind of enablers to create right kind of DNA, right kind of processes the way he wants it. And I think in that context, to expect as a single entity, as an independent director, to create havoc or to create impact or to create effect, it is like, expecting like an, hero of a, Indian film, the typical Bollywood movie where the, hero is expected to do the driving, he is expected to do everything, dancing, singing, he has to run around the trees, and at the same time, he has to pack his 6 packs, and he has to be everything, jack of all kind of things on that account. I think we are expecting a little too much on that account, but at the same time, he can be an integrated part of it.
Right, Smita, now look at this sort of distinction between these two individuals. I mean, Vikesh here is pointing out that, the independent director is like the sine qua non and, a very, very integral aspect of a corporate institution and its success. And here Nagesh says that, so big deal, he's just one of the KMPs, he's key managerial personnel for, the audience. I'll just, I'll not use acronyms. So, and there's no big deal, why saddle him with so much responsibility? Why make him a big hero? Out of, somebody who's just another professional who's just come to the table, sits for an hour in a meeting, takes his remuneration and goes away. So what's the big deal about it? What do you have to say on that?
So that's where the tightrope comes in, doesn't it? So given the name of this seminar and what it's all about, and that's exactly what the tightrope is all about, is because the expectations from independent directors are extremely high. We are, in a sense, the conscience keepers of the organization, yet we can't afford to ruffle feathers either of other independent directors or members of the board or members of management. So how do you do that? Your job, that you're mandated with, both by law and more importantly than law, but by ethics, is to really be the conscience keeper of the organization, to ensure that whatever an organization is supposed to be doing, they're doing not just by letter, but also by spirit. And that can sometimes be a tough one. So there are so many conflicts that arise. So a very classic conflict is between the management and independent directors of the board as a whole, or maybe even perhaps committees of the board, for example, the NRC, which is comprised of independent directors. So there's a very fine line between what should come to the NRC and what is management, what is the purview of management. Similarly, so for various other things. There are shareholders, there are regulators, there are analysts, there is the market, so there are so many stakeholders, all of whom have expectations from this one role called the independent director. And for the individuals in them to manage these expectations, that's where the tightrope comes in.
That's Radhika. Unmute Radhika.
Given this as a backdrop, it is only important for us to explore what we feel about the new proposed amendments that have been proposed by SEBI. And, let's begin with Nagesh, in terms of your views, in terms of the new legislation which is proposed for independent directors. What are your initial views in that regard?
I think, thanks Radhika for kicking it off, this SEBI related thing. I will spend some more time on this particular part, so give me some time. I think I can clearly see there are five important things that this particular thing is talking about. And I think some of them are very good, and one of them could be controversial if it is misused by proxy advisories. The first one that I will talk about is there is a dual process that is recommended under the new this particular thinking paper, this white paper. In that they are saying that it is not only in AGM or EGM the director would be elected, but at the same time they require what they call these minority shareholders also to approve that particular part. Now they are saying majority of the minority shareholders. Now this is where, frankly speaking, if let's say somebody who holds 100 shares is unlikely to be interested in taking a key part in that particular thing, unless there is some conscientious kind of efforts being made to put a lot of things together to become the majority of the minority in that regard. And I think that is going to be the role which probably proxy advisories can play. And I think they can either make it a hit or they can make it a disaster kind of thing. So it is, I would say, we would leave it to these people to decide how they can really create an efficient kind of mechanism in place. So this, if you are asking me, a great point, how it will eventually evolve will decide the importance of that particular part. So this is the first point that is important. The second one is on NRC related part. And I think in that context, nothing has changed for NRC. All of us are supposed to have what we call the metrics of these skill sets. You know, so who is great in strategy, who is great in HR, who is great in accounts, finance, legal, all that kind of thing is there, who knows the subject matter of the company, business in which they are in. So that particular metrics is available. But if you see that metrics and eventually the sort of appointments that are happening in the companies, you will find number of times it is heavily loaded towards maybe you have 2-3 chartered accountants, 2 lawyers together. You will find, you know, too many people in the industry there. So there is a lopsidedness which is there in the board. I think from that perspective, now they are saying that it is necessary for you to create right kind of balance of skill in this particular metrics. And that's a good thing that they have talked about. And by virtue of that, they are going to force you to create what we call the ID specs, you know, what kind of person you are looking out for. So you can't pick up a chartered accountant when you really require somebody with, let's say, a talent in HR. So I think in that context, that lopsidedness which is there, which will get out of it. And I think that is a great move that they have talked about on the thing. The third one, and that is very critical, you know, on a weekly basis, you will find a typical kind of answers for resignation. Somebody will say due to preoccupation, due to some other commitments or some personal reasons, I am resigning. And the guy the next week takes on a new responsibility as a director in some another company. So I can't believe that for the weekend he wants to go out. So he has that, you know, pre-commitment and that kind of thing. The next Monday he's free to take on. So I think this is a great thing that has happened. By virtue of that, now it is going to be very clear for the people to say, before I get inducted on the board, I need to do my enhanced due diligence very clearly, because I can't then have a nice way or easy way out to say, hey guys, on the weekend, I want to go out. So let me resign and let me join another company. So I think that's again a great move that SEBI has come out with, which will bring a lot of discipline amongst people to say, let me take on responsible jobs and let me, you know, do that kind of thing properly on that account. Another one, and with that, I feel is a brilliant one, because I am a chair of audit committee of majority of the companies. Being a chartered accountant and a law graduate, I think people think that I'm probably the best in that regard, which probably is correct from their side as well. But now they are saying, previously we could have had entire audit committee of independent people. Now they are saying it is necessary for you to have 1/3 of people who are non-executive director. So indirectly, I think, you know, the work of audit committee is now going to be a comprehensive thing, which is certainly external people are there who are independent, but also internal people are there who should take on that, bring in responsibility or accountability towards that particular function. Because now you can't take a view to say, you know, I met that auditor only once in 3 months. You know, I met that internal auditor just once in a, you know, 3 months kind of thing. So you don't expect me to do the thing. Now you have one more person who's going to be representing the non-executive director category, which I think will bring that kind of comprehensive responsibility amongst the, you know, these audit committee members to say, hey guys, we can't take this lightly. And I think as the chair of audit committee now going forward, I have started asking if non-executive directors are there. I hope you are comfortable. You have spent more time with those people. You know, you have, you know, integrity of data is very critical. So I think this is also one more great thing that has happened. And last but not least, and I think this is where you must praise SEBI. SEBI is very clear. They are now saying independent director is a great profession worthy of looking at it on an independent basis. And in that context, you know, there are 2 ways they are right now, you know, you can remunerate. One is by virtue of increasing the sitting fees, which is of course capped at 1 lakh rupees per meeting. And at the same time, you can give what they call the commission for a profitable company on that account. Now they are very clear, and I think if you are asking me personally, I'm in favor of that particular part. They feel this commission business should be stopped. There has to be a great involvement of these independent directors towards the prosperity of the company on a long-term basis. You take your fees, no problems. And they are, I think, looks like they are talking about, can we, put that, we can put that cap off of 1 lakh rupees. So there may be a scenario, somebody may be paid even 5 lakh rupees per thing. But I think he has got that typical fixed fee for whatever he's worth for that particular part. And at the same time, now they are talking about, and this is where they've asked all of us, do you think we should look at ESOPs back on that particular pad, but ESOPs with a 5-year vesting period, which is like looking at a long-term scenario. So now indirect message to people, don't look at quarter-on-quarter basis, don't look at year-on-year basis, don't look at your profitability so you can get your commission out of that particular part. Believe in long-term prospect and long-term prosperity of the company overall. So if you are asking me, these are some of the great kind of points which SEBI has come out, and I'm totally in for it because it will give a great impetus and importance to the independent directors. And at the same time, a new creed which will come up is of non-executive directors, because they are the people who will now, people will start talking about saying that why should I be only an independent director? If I know the business there, let me become an NED there, and through which I can contribute. So these are the 2 points that I thought I will just put it up on that account. So I am all in favor of that particular points in that regard.
So much, Nagesh, because this is a great insight and the overview of the entire new proposed notification and paper. What I'll do is, there's a lot to be spoken about in terms of the points that you made, especially in terms of, while all of these changes are happening at one go, there is also a liability angle, which we'll come to towards the end, because that's really, really very important in terms of the balancing act as far as the directors are concerned. But I'd like to hear the views of both Vikesh and Smita on this, since it would be great to have a perspective from all around. So if Vikesh or Smita, if you could start.
Yeah, Smita will start, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was a passing the parcel. So I think, yes, it has, there has been a lot of talk in recent months about, particularly, I think, the remuneration part of, independent directors. How should it be comprised, what it should be. I think for the first time, SEBI is also talking about a relationship between what can be executive and non-executive compensation and how should one look at it. And I think that's an important divergence from the current practice, where it is more an administrative kind of a perspective. And I think that itself will encourage talent to take up these roles. So that's one of the points that Nagesh also made, that people will start looking at board directorships, non-executive directorships as a profession, because there will be a significant remuneration attached to it, which is very few and far between today. Today, companies that pay that kind of money are very, very few and far between. And therefore, the kind of, board positions are really looked on as retirement positions and are therefore treated as such. So that will be a very welcome change once it starts being looked at as a profession, as it is in fact in countries like Australia, etc. Board positions are considered professional positions, and there is a whole thing, which also brings me to another important aspect, and that is the skilling of directors on the board and keeping up with the knowledge required, etc. Now, while currently it is the mandate of companies to develop directors, very few companies actually do anything significant in that respect. And in all fairness, directors themselves do very little in that area. However, if the expectations of non-executive directors and independent directors are going to be so much higher, and if what is at stake is going to be so much higher, people will automatically start looking at keeping themselves current, of developing themselves and skilling themselves. in terms of, I tend to agree with Nagesh that the proposition of getting a majority of minority shareholders also to prove may not entirely be a practical kind of a suggestion. I think the intent behind it is clear, the intent behind it is laudable, but to put it into, to actually execute on that may not actually be practical and may not actually go in the direction that is possibly intended by SEBI. So that was my comment around that. Uh, but if I may just, take one step back and look at it at a slightly broader level, the fact that what comes across to me from this paper is that SEBI is actually looking at and thinking very carefully about this particular position. As I mentioned in my previous comments, it is a position that is considered the conscience keeper of the company. And therefore, the fact that SEBI is looking at this position more and more carefully is, I think, very good news.
Summary of in terms of the perspective from even the independent directors side to be able to up their game in terms of just the knowledge that they require. Vikesh, your thoughts on the same?
Yeah, I think there are 8 points which SEBI has recently floated for discussion purpose. And all these 8 points, almost about 5-6 points have been discussed by Smita and Nagesh both. 2-3 points are left, and SEBI has not covered 2 very important aspects in this. So I think amongst everything else, the definition of the independent director, the difference between the KMPs and the independent directors, that has been explained, and that's quite good. There should be uniform cooling period of 3 years of appointment as independent directors proposed for KMPs or the relatives of KMPs and also the employees of the promoter group companies. This has been quite a backdoor entry for many independent directors, and you will find that some of the highly reputed companies have been recruiting independent directors through this route. So this is one thing which is very, very important. And rest, I think everything has been covered by my 2 co-panelists. The things which have been missed out are on the training and development. That aspect, this paper, I was expecting that they would touch this subject, but neither they have touched upon the training nor they have discussed about the evaluation. Now, these are 2 very, very important aspects. Training is so very important that today, if you will see the body which is there, IICA, they have started a data bank for independent directors. You will be surprised that hardly any companies have gone there. 1,900 companies have just gone there. And there are about, say, only 21,000 people have registered there so far. Out of that, also, only about 7,000 people have passed out that exam. Now, that is a pathetic number. Today in the country, you have 7,000 listed companies and another about 8,000 other entities which require independent directors or directors of substance. Otherwise also, we need about 50,000 people. This data bank has been in place for last 15 months and only 21,000 people have registered there. This should have been a minimum number of about 50,000. Only 4,500 women have registered, whereas we need minimum 10,000 women there. So until and unless SEBI does not include training mandate on a regular basis and also the evaluation, the quality of all the board members, because training is not confined only to the independent directors. Training is meant for everyone. As Nagesh was saying earlier, that independent director is one amongst others. He's right, because everyone must behave like independent director only. If people start taking stances and stands and biases, the decision making will suffer. When you come to the board, only company's interest should be there. If you are a functional director, your function responsibility, your executive responsibility should not drive you to the board. So this is where, training is important and evaluation is more important. Still, not enough importance is being given to evaluation. In certain companies where evaluation is more directed towards the, small shareholder directors or public interest directors, there it is happening religiously, but those are also driven via the softwares. So the personal engagement is not there. So these two aspects have been ignored by SEBI. And rest, I think all my points have been covered. Mandatory cooling period, etc. Those should be also be important, and they should, as Nagesh was saying earlier, that 1 week, yeah, but now it is 6 months. It should be actually 1 month, 1 year for everybody.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much quite comprehensive between the three speakers as far as the SEBI is concerned. Now, Nagesh, I have this question for you. I think, in my opinion, the current existing laws are not as stifling to shoo away independent directors personally. But there seems to be a general perception that it is. I mean, let me give you the background. Section 149, subsection 12 of the Companies Act says that an independent director is held liable only for the acts of omission and commission, notwithstanding anything in this act. That means it's a non-obstante clause. It says notwithstanding anything in this act, they are held liable only for acts of omission and commission, and that too by virtue of the board processes which they should have acted diligently about. And that's the background. You are a chief internal auditor, risk assessor in possibly some of the top companies before. Now, let me ask you a very double-edged question. You have this, you're an independent director, but at the same time, you're wearing a hat of a chartered accountant. You're also a law graduate. You know the basics of the law, and you see it in front of you. You're an independent director of an organization. You see that they say, even if it's the top four of the audit firms or the, which has done this audit work right in front of you, and which, is being shown to you, and you feel that there is a problem with it. Somewhere you feel that, now should I point it out? As an independent director, it's my responsibility because I'm supposed to act diligently. At the same time, you're going to think, why should I interfere with somebody who's a professional and who's been, there as an auditor since several years, and they are very high profile auditors. Now, how do you match this? I want to ask this question specifically to you, and then I'll shift this question slightly, twist it when I come to the other two panelists. And please keep your answers short and to the points, because we've got quite a bit of ground to cover.
Yeah, I think good question that you asked me. Let me put the other way around. First thing first, there is no free lunch, very clearly. I think I have seen some, independent directors saying, hum kya kare, we meet only once in 3 months. So for us, whatever that is presented to us, we'll go by that particular part. But I have a different perspective on that account. I think none of our business to get into these kind of companies if we don't know what kind of things is in store for you. So I think you need to do your enhanced due diligence, and which is very critical on that account. You have to study the company. You have to look at where it stands and what is likely to happen over a period of when you are going to get involved, maybe 3 years or 5 years, generally 5 years. That's what it is. So you have to take a stock on that account. And at the same time, you have to look at who are the auditors. This is also a very critical part that you have to look at it. What has been their performance, how consistent it is. Then you have to look at it.
Sorry to interrupt. I think you use the word enhanced due diligence. There is nowhere does the act or the judgment say enhanced. It says reasonable. Why are you using the word enhanced? I don't like the word enhanced.
Enhanced is to see to it that you get away from your personal liabilities as much as possible. As you rightly said, section 149 that you talked about, omissions and commissions. The point is, there are a lot of things you can ask as an independent director. If you are refused to give it, you have all the right to ask for that information. Today, if you get, some sort of a knowledge or some sort of a information which you can't believe in it, then I think you have to ask that question. If somebody says, no, but he gave me that paper, so I relied on it. The point is, there is something called financial integrity needs to be validated by something. Now, if somebody tells me in this life that there are no moratoriums at all in banking today, do you think I will take it as is done? I need to ask at least 10 questions to corroborate that particular part. Why? Why? I think there is no harm in asking these kind of questions. And if you don't complete your part of your that enhanced due diligence, and this is where I'm saying this is very critical. Otherwise, you take it as is granted to you, then I think you are being taken for a ride and you are allowing it to be taken for a ride. I think you are totally responsible for that particular part. So I think in that context, there is always a possibility to find out whether you are on the right track or not. 19-20 का फर्क चलता है. It can't be a फर्क of 5 to 20, and that is the point I'm talking about. And when it comes to 5, you don't know from 20 when are you going to 5, and that becomes a problem for most of the people. So you should know when to stop your losses.
Perfect. Okay, a very, very good answer. I want to come to Smita with a slightly twisted question as far as this aspect is concerned. Now, Smita, you can unmute yourself. Smita, you are the founder and managing director of Illuminos Consulting. Now, obviously, you train individuals, you train them to build up an organizational performance and individual performance. Now, I assume that you illuminate them with certain information which tells them to give themselves to the best of their ability. Nagesh pointed out that this is very good what he said, that look, I'm a master at my subject. I'm going to use all the knowledge that I have and I'm going to bring it to the fore regardless of whether somebody likes it or not. Do you think that enhances the individual performance, or do you think that somewhere, it's like this debate which we often have within the judicial overreach, where there is judicial activism on one part where somebody thinks that, okay, this is activist judiciary, and somewhere where somebody thinks, oh, this is judicial overreach. So somewhere, do you think that Nagesh is saying that, I'm overreaching myself and you tend to differ with him? What do you say?
So I would say that I agree with Nagesh to some extent and disagree with him to some extent. If there is willful behavior on the part of management and either truncated or falsified information is presented to the board, there is nothing much that you can do about it, because there is absolutely no humanly possible way that you can verify every single piece of information that is presented to you. However, the fact that you need to bring your A game to the board is it's very clear. If you don't know about an industry, I mean, a board is about governance. Every director is not supposed to be an expert on every particular industry where they may sit on the board. However, I think it is incumbent upon directors to equip themselves with enough knowledge to at least be able to do a, spit test, which gives you a sense of where things are going. That's one part of it. The second important part of it is market intelligence. I think it is incumbent on people who have board positions to keep your eyes and ears open in terms of what is being said about the company outside of the boardroom. And does it kind of sync with what you're hearing inside of the boardroom? And that gives you, again, that indication that should you be asking more questions, what is the kind of information you should be asking for? And should you be asking for a completely independent meeting with auditors regularly, which I think as independent directors or as audit committee, you are completely entitled to do. So just to put it in a nutshell, yes, there is a responsibility on part of the directors to ensure that they are well enough informed to know what to ask for. But if there is willful acts on part of the management, there is very little that one can do to actually catch that.
Great. Now, I want to ask a question to Vikesh on the same line, but I'll sort of, change it a bit. Now, Vikesh, you train directors. You heard Nagesh and you heard Smita both on this. You will give them the requisite information apart from the director's proficiency test, which they're supposed to take, sort of curated by the MCA. Now, there was this very, very pernicious judgment, in my opinion, of the Supreme Court, which said, in the case of, I think it was JP Associates, where it said that to the independent directors that you cannot transfer your personal assets until unless this corporate insolvency issue has been resolved. Now, that, according to me, was putting some sort of a ton of bricks over a director's head. Now, are you going to tell your students or your would-be directors about this and say that, look, here the law according to me is onerous, it's stifling, but at the same time, this is a very lucrative job. You're going to build contacts, you're going to build connections. Don't worry about this silly little judgment. There are quite a few others also which will take care of you. So please go ahead. Are you going to be that comprehensive about it, and that transparent would be the appropriate word rather than comprehensive? Or are you going to shield some of these things so that, make an independent director a very rosy picture, so that even your institute about training directors continues and flourishes?
Fortunately, Swapnil, for me, our training guru is sitting here, Mr. Nagesh Pinge,
Right.
takes our classes
That's the
on
reason why I'm
ERP,
afraid. That's the reason why I'm afraid.
ERP, risk
He's sitting here.
management, and these are the things that he explains them so very well.
Right.
But in case of JP that you spoke about, it was a blatant case of negligence by the independent directors. They were not going to the boardroom with their reading glasses. They were going to the boardroom with goggles and sunglasses. Such people have been taken up rightly by the Supreme Court, and there should be some example setting. You cannot be so blind to whatever is going around you. Everything was known to people. And if people are not going to take cognizance of any of these things, like Smita was saying, that if you know any willful acts on part of the promoters, then you have to stand up. Then you have to get out of it. That's the only way you can get out of it, and let the world know that these are the reasons you are quitting for. So there is no way that institute of directors or me in my personal capacity would ever advise anyone to overlook. No way. These things are simply out of common sense. You don't need law. If you see anything happening wrong, please stand up and raise your
No, I didn't mean that. I said you would not show them these judgments. That's what I meant. I'm not saying that you will tell them to overlook.
No. We have to show them these judgments, and we have to tell them that please be prepared. If you are, many people come to us that we have come to you for training so that we are taken care of. I said, unless you will not act upon, you will not take action, nothing can save you. And please be prepared for the punishment.
Right. Sometimes, we as lawyers tell would-be lawyers, wannabe lawyers that, you're reading tinkle books, you're going to do that when you study for law. So we try to, put a hat over their head and say that, you're going to read only tinkle books and comic books. Actually, when they really sit for the law, they don't really know what sort of books they're reading. So anyway, that was on a lighter note anyway. Radhika, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So, on this note of Vikesh having especially given the introduction of Nagesh as a key guru on the risk mitigation part for the students, I think, Nagesh, it would be wonderful to hear from you what some of the pointers, in terms of the red flags that you bring to the notice of your students or even as a director. Especially because given the fact that not everybody who's on the board that is representing has financial background. They come from different disciplines, and not everybody would have knowledge about financial controls and dealings. So, what are the few things that you recommend and suggest in your classes when you teach the subject on risk to your students?
Yeah, I think one thing is, of course, what we teach in IOD are more subjects like how to look at risk management, how to set the agenda of risk management committee. I think, as you are aware, only few companies are supposed to have risk management committee. Rest of the things, the onus has been shifted to audit committee to look at it. And this is where the MCA gives a right kind of thing for all the companies, whereas LODR, which is the SEBI's prerogative, is revolving around companies which are quoted on that account. So to that extent, something is called Diwane Khas and something is called Diwane Aam, as I would like to call it, But both have to be met by people in Diwane Khas in that regard. So we have to see to it that risk management thing is being done. So that is a different story. But I think what I tell people, and this is where I think a lot of people will be very happy to hear, you know the story of Zubin Mehta. Zubin Mehta was a great, orchestra person. Yes. He was in charge of that Israel Philharmonic thing. there will be about 100 plus kind of artists who will be sitting on that typical stage, and they would come out with that synchronized orchestra, and he would just do these kind of things to show how synchronized it is. In fact, as a chair of audit committee, I also see that orchestra on the other side. I always say, you have to know your 11 people, know your 11 team. I'm a cricketer, so I can tell you about it. You need to know, what I call, you need to know your promoter. You need to know your company and the business they are in. You need to know your laws and regulations, which is very critical. It doesn't stop there. You have to know the people who are really going to play that music. The company secretary is very critical. So is the legal person coming from your profession, Swapnil and Radhika. Then I also require a person who's chief compliance officer telling me everything is honky-dory on that account. Then it doesn't stop there. Chief of internal auditor, chief of risk, then chief of financial officer is also very critical for me. CISO is the system information system is very critical. And last but not least is the CEO who runs the show. All of them are the part of my orchestra. They are sitting there, and how seamlessly they are coming out with their performance in everything. I think a matured person can really take a view to see, are there any discords? And if there are any discords, you have to pay attention to it to find out what it is. I think this is a very critical part for an external party to do it. I think I've seen two kinds of directors. There are people who have probably run that business as a CEO in some other organization. They tend to then say, let me roll up the sleeve and advise you what you have to do. But I think there are other people who say, I have never done the business, so let me keep away. I think you need to balance that thing out. So I think this is what I tell people, that you need to be very, very pragmatic. At the same time, you must have your own Lakshman Rekha as we call it, beyond which nothing is going to be acceptable to be on that account. So I think I always say you are on the bridge. On the left-hand side is where you are on the red zone, and on the other side, you are in the grays, and you are on the other side. There is nothing like white in life. You will invariably in grays. You learn to live within this grays, but at the same time, see to it that you set your risk appetites in that regard. And where it is going out, call it, this is a foul game, I don't accept it. And I think if you are tough, you will be able to maneuver the way you want it. And that is what I think I tell people on that.
Nagesh, I think two of the most important points I think you made were one, in terms of the intelligence that one gathers beforehand, before even deciding to get on the board. In terms of who the promoters of businesses, the market intel, and the people which are there. More importantly, to be able to clearly speak out on the board and register one's consent and comments.
I think we are missing you in asking questions. I'm barely able to hear you, Radhika.
Okay. Sorry.
I don't know whether you are going to ask me questions. If others are happy to listen to that, I'll be happy.
No. Are you?
I think the question will be to Vikesh.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Nagesh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. No, what I was saying was two of the important points that you made right now, which are very crucial. One was very clearly the intelligence that needs to be gathered prior to getting onto the board. So in terms of understanding, supplemented by what Smith said, in terms of also keeping the ear to the ground always on an ongoing basis to hear what is being said. The second most important thing that you said was to be able to register one's questions and dissent. So it's very important to be able to question what's happening, gather the information, and if required, validate from elsewhere. Just two inputs what we quickly get from one from Smith and one from Nagesh, because Smith, the fact that you train,
I can't hear you, Radhika.
We are barely able to hear you, Radhika. That's the problem with things.
Okay.
There is some issue with your audio.
Let me sort that out. In the meanwhile, Swapnil, can you just take this question? Especially connected with to experience of Smita and Vikesh to the specific point, red flags.
Yeah. Okay. What Radhika is trying to say is that as far as the red flags are concerned, what red flags do you notice as far as being an independent director? Now, Nagesh gave a very comprehensive view, very it's fantastic to have Nagesh simply because it's both professorial and practical at the same time. You know, it's great to have a combination of that's what I would call as a consummate teacher. You know, who gives you both a professorial and a practical viewpoint. Now, Smita, you come from a very different genre. So what do you have to say about these red flags? You know that Nagesh just pointed out.
So one of the biggest red flags is inconsistency. So, for example, if you find that internal audit is showing a lot of gaps in various processes, and yet you have, maybe customer experience reports or maybe financial reports or etc., which are painting a very rosy picture, that's a huge inconsistency because you cannot have huge process gaps with great outcomes. Secondly, if you find that, looking at the financials, I think one of the things that I always do is I insist that we must have an independent discussion with auditors, go through the matters of the matters of consequence that they have discussed with the management with a fine-tooth comb. I think that is where the gray lies in the entire thing, and therefore to pick those comments threadbare is important. Ensure that there is comprehensive data. So where you need not just the financial data, you need the operating data, you need the customer data, you need employee data. Wherever you see that there is something that is not gelling with something else, that's where the red flags get raised. So I look for inconsistencies. That's one. The second thing, as I said, is that the second thing is where I find that information flow is coming reluctantly, if at all. So if the board is asked or if the committee is asked for certain information and it doesn't come and it doesn't come and it doesn't come, that's a red flag too. So like that, it's something that you develop over a period of time that you sense where something is going wrong, but you can only do that once you have enough experience and enough knowledge of both your own subject matter, your committee subject matter, and of the business that you're part of.
Okay, now I'll shift that question to Vikesh. Radhika, is that okay, or you want to go ahead now on that question?
Yeah, that's fine. Can you hear me now? Is it better?
Yeah, you are a little better now, but
no,
still
I think I'm going to switch on my video. Is this better now? Is it better?
Please go ahead. Let me see.
Okay. No, just to understand, Vikesh, just on these red flags, in your experience, how easy it is it really to be on the board and to be able to raise these issues, particularly when, there aren't really, particularly if you are the only voice on the table around there, actually?
It's quite a challenge. It's quite a challenge because it's not easy to understand these ground realities so very quickly. You have to get deep into it, and you cannot say that, whatever my audit colleagues are saying and my other friends are saying, I will accept it. You have to understand each aspect yourself. If there are any deviations, Smita was talking about inconsistency. Even consistency and too much of consistency is also dangerous. If something is just not changing, some factors, some ratios are just always remaining so very consistent, that also is a matter of doubt. And that should also be explored, that why is it so? And particularly, as far as promoters are concerned, they are taking certain interest in some matters. You can sense that. If you are socializing with them, if you are meeting them often, you can just sense it that something is fishy. This is living beyond his means, beyond his purpose of the business. If certain expenses, certain assets are, personal assets are being created within the company, one can make out easily. It's not very difficult. So it is not the lack of knowledge. It is the lack of sightedness. Can you see? I know that in certain banks, even the former, say, finance secretary was on the board and chairman of the bank. You will say, was it due to lack of knowledge that he could not see those red flags? Simply because he chose not to even have a look at those things. So these are the things that happen. Red flags are very easy to identify. If you are involved with the organization, you don't have to go there on a day-to-day basis. In your routine induction, quarterly visits to the plants, if you are not wanting to go beyond the boardroom, then you are surely buying problems. If you are independent director, you are entitled to visit the market, you are entitled to visit the plants. Please go at regular intervals and do justice to your role and identify those red flags. Nagesh would know these things so well.
Okay. We got the gist, Vikesh, from all the three of you. Now, those are the red flags that we, sort of talked about. Let me talk now about safeguards that I think, SEBI should, sort of take it very seriously, in my opinion. Now, I'll speak from both sides, because SEBI tends to regulate a lot, in my opinion, does very little, in my opinion, to really put themselves in the shoes of that independent director. That's one way of looking at things. The other way that I would look at things is that look at the Tata mystery battle that recently concluded in the Supreme Court. Oppression and mismanagement challenged or canvassed by the mystery side. Tata saying nothing doing. It is perfect corporate governance. It's perfect corporate, process. Now, when you go back to 1917, when the Articles of Association, and you go back to the interpretation of that, when a legal battle can go as far as back as 103 years ago to interpret Articles of Association and to everything that flows from thereafter, to be telling SEBI that, look, safeguard me, especially when we have very brilliant corporate lawyers interpreting, a massive Companies Act with so many schedules and everything. Where do you think can SEBI even play a role? That question first, to me, in my opinion, should go to Nagesh, because he can throw more light on this. That where do you think SEBI, if at all, can do justice to it, other than giving this, saying giving these SOPs to independent directors, give ESOPs bhi milega aapko as part of remuneration and all that, and then putting these things here and there and stuff like that. But according to me, that's more of that's its best job that it can do. It's gone to the best of its ability to paint a rosy picture, and not really rosy, but to do justice to that. But tell me, what other safeguards, if at all, can SEBI give? Because that's the question that most of my corporate team, in the sense, our corporate committee has asked, and we thank them for bringing these questions up, because but for them, we wouldn't have been able to come out with such diversity of questions. So go ahead, Nagesh.
I think first thing first, let me make a disclaimer. I'm an ex-Tata employee and also worked very closely with the other person there. So
that's the reason why I asked you. I didn't point that out in my question.
No, I would rather say, I will answer you in a very nice fashion. SEBI doesn't come into these affairs for the simple reason it is not a quoted company. So that's my answer for this particular part. So this is one. The second thing, I think I will now answer you generally on that particular part. I think, to be fair, I think SEBI is really doing a great job when it comes to the listed companies are concerned. I think I am of the genuine opinion they are very prompt in coming out with corrective decisions. And I think they are really taking a conscious keeper's role in real right earnest. So if you're asking me, frankly, you go there, you will get at least some informal advice, which is in your best interest in that regard. So I think that is the way I would give them full marks for that particular thing. Now, I think whether you want to rely on Articles of Association of 103 years and all other things, I will leave it to the legal people to battle it out on that particular part. But I think what has happened is the decisions of these kind of things are more of an aberration. In rest of the things, I must tell you, and I think this is where I just want to add just two things, and don't feel bad about it. I remember at this point of time a book written by Ram Charan called Boards That Deliver. In that, it is nicely mentioned. And I think this is a reality for all our independent directors. You ask them, there are three kinds of companies as per Mr. Ramcharan. There are something called ceremonial boards. Ceremonial boards are those where they also conduct board meetings or they also conduct some meeting. Generally, it is coupled with some sort of incentivization. It could be cocktails, it could be dinners, it could be overseas trips, it could be some product launch and these kind of things. Even today, there are quite a few ceremonial boards which are there. The second one are those which are the so-called liberated boards, where you are allowed to be heard. You can talk anything on that account, but you will find that only favorable points are picked up by the company for enacting and for action. The remaining ones remain pending in that regard. And I think the third one are the real progressive boards, where you are not only listened, but right kind of work is being done. And I think all these independent directors, when you are doing and joining that particular part, you know, it is like three different hotels. You know which hotel you are entering in that particular part. So at latter stage, an independent director saying that I am expecting something like progressive board, but I have joined the ceremonial board. This is what happens to that guy. That kind of disappointment should not happen when you are choosing the right kind of board in that regard. You must know your ability. You must know your risk appetite. You must know your strength. You must know your own integrity related factors, and accordingly choose that company. You will never repent. And that's what I will say in that regard.
Okay, so now let me bounce that question with Vikesh. Vikesh, what Nagesh is trying to say is, he is saying that SEBI, being a very professional body, has done its best so far. And if I've understood correctly, Nagesh, correct me if I'm wrong. And that's the best that it can do. And, you know, lawyers can go back even 500 years and, you know, go to the inception of Companies Act sometime in Britain and all that. And if they want to bring that in, you know, within the fold of their arguments, they can go back. But that doesn't really tell a potential or an existing independent director some sort of any succor or help from SEBI. SEBI is saying, this is the best that I've done. Take it or leave it. Is that the way I should interpret what Nagesh is saying? Is my interpretation correct, or is my interpretation very cynical?
Well, to an extent, whatever Nagesh is saying is right, because SEBI cannot take stands for one-to-one basis. SEBI has to go by the Companies Act, which is there, and their own LODR requirements which are there. Nagesh is so right in saying that SEBI is quite prompt and has been doing a lot in this space today. You will be surprised that SEBI's guidelines on ESG compliance guidelines have been issued just within few weeks of the similar guidelines being issued in US and in UK. You can't expect better speed than this. Now, whatever the rules have been set, people have to play the game within those rules. SEBI would change, MCA would change, and fortunately for us, after Companies Act 2013, changes are pretty fast. If there is something that needs to be corrected, if you find that it is one-off, you can ignore it. But if you think it is setting a precedent, you can immediately correct it by any regulatory correction. So, to answer you, one has to go by what is there in the law. In the Companies Act and in LODR, these are the two documents basis which companies are run, and they have to be followed. Now, what more can SEBI do? SEBI is also open. It invites suggestions like it has invited now every time. There is no such open forum. There are not other bodies who invite these suggestions, who debate this. Today, this discussion paper which has been floated by SEBI, I think it has been discussed at the best of the forums, CII, FICCI, IOD forum, IICA forum, and ASSOCHAM. Everybody has discussed. Enough people are contributing to SEBI's thinking and in decision making. So this is what I would say and close here for the time being.
Okay.
I may not satisfy you fully, but I think this is where we have to go with SEBI.
No, I'm very happy with both the answers given by Nagesh and Vikesh both. It's always great to have a very sort of an independent, balanced perspective. Now this is where I bring Smita in. Smita, you heard both Nagesh and Vikesh, saying that SEBI has done its best as a professional body. In March 2020, there was a circular by SEBI about sort of liability of independent directors. Now, a lot of people, dealing with this at that time thought that, oh, it's such a beautiful circular that it's sort of limiting the liability of the directors. So in essence, what it's indirectly doing is it's telling you that there are inbuilt safeguards within those provisions itself, that only for this you shall be liable. Then, of course, reading it harmoniously with the Companies Act and the other aspects of SEBI, which may be there, which may be present, we don't know, somewhere it can crop up from which we may not have paid attention to that. What would you suggest? And I'm pretty happy with what Nagesh is saying and Vikesh is saying, and I'm personally, my view is that SEBI has done enough. But do you think, what is your opinion about this when you tell and when you train an independent director, that are there adequate safeguards or can we do more? Ourselves, you've mentioned that we can do our best, but do you think that there has to be, other than SEBI, do you think SEBI as a regulatory body alone is enough and should be solely empowered to do this? Or do you think that the MCA can also, with its notifications and all of those things, dilute some of, so-called circulars which may be interpreted as somewhat stifling by SEBI?
So I think you raise a very important point, Swapnil, when you use the word interpret. So whether it is MCA, whether it is SEBI, whether it is any other either regulatory or legal entity, the wording of any circular, any clause, etc., may be with a certain intent. It may clarify to a large extent, but there are two important things. One is it completely in consonance with everything that has gone before it? Or is there a precedent of some kind that may get in the way or be contradictory to what this is saying? The second thing is that how much is whatever is being proposed open to interpretation? And that is, I think, where the problem comes in. So while SEBI has done a lot to ring fence and to safeguard independent directors by mentioning words like, willful negligence, etc., how do you interpret that? How do you establish that? It is actually in the flaws in that, or the protections in that, actually only come to the fore when there is actually a case and when that is debated, and unfortunately that mostly happens then in the courts of law. So on the face of it, I think SEBI does a lot. In the interpretation and in the implementation is where the problems lie. And that's where the publicity happens, and that's what creates the fear factor in the minds of independent directors and others.
Okay.
Before I ask the question, I just wanted to know, can you hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you are.
Okay.
Much better
That's
now.
wonderful. So, the time that we have now, and we are still have to take up questions from the participants. I'll just keep a brief question which will encompass the points relating to even liability, as an issue for the directors. And we could start with you, Vikesh, in terms of your view. In terms of the process that has been set out presently, there isn't really a mechanism which is a rather, formal mechanism that is available in an informal sitting, especially where an independent director can bring an issue that is important to SEBI without expecting a direct coercive action by SEBI or the regulators, or for that matter, its disclosure to the stock exchanges. In terms of a lot of times when directors hold on in terms of what they want to say, we've often heard that it is because either information was not really available or they didn't really have enough grounds to speak. So what is your view about this in terms of the steps that can be taken? especially in regard to the steps that are taken up by SEBI and other enforcement directorate agencies, where, you know, the look back period in terms of liability can be substantive, you know. So what about the steps leading on, or the time leading on to any action which is taken by a regulator? And here, Swapnil, I'd request you to pitch in as well, given your vast experience on litigation in India. Yes,
Yeah.
so please go ahead.
Radhika. Yeah, Swapnil, you want to add something to it?
No, you go. You guys answer, then, you know.
So no, this
depending
is a
upon your
point
answer,
where
I'll pitch in.
this is a point where everyone will be adding, but we'd love to start with you, Vikesh.
Yeah.
Okay. So as far as I'm concerned, what I would say is that this is an internal matter of the company. Any discomfort to anyone is an internal matter of the company. It need not go outside the four walls of the company. Now, is there a provision to record your dissent, to record your discomfort? Yes. Every board meeting minutes have this provision that if you are not comfortable with what is being stated, you can put up your dissent, and that has to be recorded. And if that is not accepted, then you have to resign, and you have to make it known to the people that my dissent is not being accepted. That is the only way out.
No.
You cannot quietly go to SEBI and say, or you can go to somebody and say that I'm having a problem in this company. No, you are part of that company. You are supposed to take collective decisions, like Nagesh was saying in the beginning, that you have to work collectively. You have to work as a team. You are not there as an inspector. You are there as a collaborator. You are there as a supporter of whatever the decisions are happening in the company. So this is the way I think doing anything like what you are prompting would open a Pandora's box. Many independent directors, over smallest discomfort, would go to the outside world, and companies' fortunes will go for a toss.
Right. So
I would leave it
before,
for others to contribute to it.
Correct, absolutely. And before both Meeta and Nagesh and Swapnil respond to it, I think one of the important points that this question can be looked at in the context of is that, you know, by recording a dissent, in terms of the liability to the director, you know, and the answerability as far as any investigation and others, that in itself, dissent after dissent after dissent, will not necessarily always be enough. So all I'm just saying is, when we are looking at the safeguard mechanisms and ring fencing of liability to independent directors, while the responsibility aspect of it in terms of answerability to the stakeholders is very important and essential, likewise, even the ability for recourse to an independent director needs to be provided as a part of the entire process itself. And this is in terms of just a point for deliberation. So Smita, if you could please take it up next, and then Nagesh, before Swapnil gives his views.
So what is your specific question, Radhika?
So the question is that as of now, as the mechanism that is of course available for any independent director is to be able to record one's dissent, and only as a part of that process that one can really move. And as rightly pointed out by Vikesh, if you were to bring the issue directly up to a regulator, it would really open up, it would be a serious issue. My question was, could SEBI consider a possibility where, in the event of, in spite of the dissent, if there isn't an immediate action, there could be a first preliminary step where there could be a non-coercive action, you know, taken up by a regulator to be able to prod the companies to take on a more proactive role as far as governance is concerned before taking an actual coercive action.
I don't think so, because that would dilute the whole point of a regulator. See, a regulator is not an arbitrator. A regulator's job is to regulate, and if anything outside of the law is happening in a particular company, and if the regulator has information about it, I think it is incumbent upon the regulator to take action. Therefore, I completely support what Vikesh is saying, that these are matters to be handled internally. And I think this is where, one of the things that SEBI is saying in its new guidelines is that the contents of the resignation letter of independent directors needs to be made public, the entire contents. So it's not just about, I'm resigning for personal reasons and I'm resigning because I don't have time. So there have been instances in the recent past where IDs have resigned for very specific reasons of governance. And there is a tendency to sweep those things under the carpet. But once this comes to the notice of a regulator is bound to take action.
Right. So absolutely, Smita, you're spot on. I was just talking about the stage prior to even resignation, because what happens is by the time the ID resigns, it obviously would mean that there has been an existing history that went on for a while for them to take up that stage, right? Unfortunately, the problem with the current laws, even as a lawyer and as an, when you advise people who really go through situations such as these, is essentially, especially in light with the IBC law and other regulations, which also act in tandem with these regulations. What really we find is there were various steps that could have been taken way beforehand. And resignation should actually be a last option in my view. But let's just hear what Nagesh has to say as well before hearing something.
Radhika, I think, you see, let's understand. IPC related thing comes in when there is something gross things that have happened. I think those kind of things, I don't think anybody has to stop. And that matter has to be put up very firmly in the same board meeting in which it happens. You can't say, okay, some 2 murders have happened in the, in the factory. Let us make some inquiries. And then in the next board meeting, we will talk about it. If somebody takes that thing, I would say he is equally responsible for that. But there are some interpretational issues. There is something where we have a firm case to fight against. Those kind of things, I think all independent directors will say, let's take a chance with that particular part. But at the same time, they will say, let's do a proper kind of evaluation, proper investigations and all. So far, you are on the right track. I think nobody will question these kind of things. Certainly, you will get notices and everything. But I think eventually, on a long-term basis, you will come out clean on that account. But I think if there are major issues on that account, if let's say some sort of a water which was getting polluted and you are taking it out and you are aware of it for the last 4 or 5 months, and then you keep a cool eye on that account, you are equally responsible for that. And as rightly said by Vikesh, you should say enough is enough. If that is not happening, I will be forced to resign on that account. Mind you, you are a part of the public limited company. And if your resignation also says, I'm not happy with whatever that has been happened, I think you have completed your job on that account. But if let's say you give a reason saying that due to preoccupation, I am resigning, you are indirectly saying, I have heard it, but I have not heard it. I think that kind of thing cannot clear you from other obligations at later stage. So that's what I'm saying. So I think you need to know where you are hitting the Lakshman Resha, as I call it, beyond which I will not accept it. So you have to, you have to define your own risk appetite to what extent you can go. The interpretational issues, I think everybody can play with, and this is where corporate lawyers help us in that regard. You can rely on some right opinions that keeps you in good stead and health up to a level, unless they are, you don't buy them into the process and you keep it just for the sake of it. So I think all of us are aware to what extent we are capable of taking chances. When it comes out of the thing, we show that, we didn't know kind of thing, which is more, I would say, a matter of defense when you can't defend it properly. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. My view is that having, let me tell you a bit about myself. Having practiced law in London, New York, and India, the basic fundamental, and Radhika being Harvard and Cambridge lawyer, and you, Nagesh, being from Ross, I'll ask this question to you, Nagesh, after I finish what I have to say. I have come to one conclusion, that across these 3 common law countries, UK, US and India. UK more so because we've borrowed the corporate system from them. And US also simply because we've borrowed the best judgment rule. And we've enhanced it in India by saying it's an uberima fide contract kind of a situation where you are of utmost good faith. You are supposed to act in a fiduciary capacity as an independent director with the company. The liability, regardless of whether you have a DNO insurance policy, which is directors and officers insurance policy, ultimately it will rely or rest upon or hinge upon the interpretation of whether you've acted in your best judgment, whether you've seen but shut your eyes, whether you've heard but shut your ears, whether you've seen but chosen to remain silent. It will rest upon that. Now, that being the case, in as much as you try to ring fence and safeguard the directors by an insurance policy, by SEBI coming out as a as a sort of an angel saying that, look, you guys are lovely because you're top professionals, so I need to protect you. But eventually somewhere this interpretation will be stretched beyond a rubber band, and in that sense the director's liability will eventually crystallize only if and only if there is an act of omission or commission done so willfully. Now, Nagesh, I haven't done any executive program, from any a foreign university, in the recent, since now 25 years that I did my master's. But since you've done it from Ross, and Ross is one of the best schools in the world, did you learn something different from them? In the sense that I think the United States is by far the best when it comes to corporate governance. And second in command is UK in that sense, and we are probably close to them, or we are slightly ahead of the UK, but I don't want to get into that. But what did you learn so that that can sort of round up the discussion to help the the audience about this? In what way is India lacking is my other way, or is India appropriate or adequate enough?
I think, let me, of course, I didn't study law there. Let me put it this way. This was a
the executive program. Yeah.
That was a CK Prahlad's course that I went through there.
Right. That's what I was about to say.
That was more on understanding how to look at the company on a strategic basis, how to look at what India can do, what you can do as an organization, and what you can do to become numero uno, if not what you can contribute to the organization. That was more on that account, so nothing to do with this particular part. But I think what I'm saying is, as you rightly said, you need to be now coming to the grassroots of how to protect yourself. I believe minutes after the meeting are very critical and important to draft. And I think if, let's say, you have a dissent, you have to see to it that dissent comes into the minutes very clearly. And that's something which help you in reality when it comes to the point to say, I was always against it, but you can't keep on doing it for a longer period of time. You can have one meeting like that, 2 meetings like that. And that is the time you have to call it quits, because you can't continue in that organization where you feel you are literally going out of, as I said, the red flag. You are entering the red side of the thing. You are hitting that particular thing. You should say stop and you should get out of it. You delay it, then you are totally part of it. And that becomes a problem, because that is where people then start looking at it. Wo ho jayega, wo sort out ho jayega, address ho jayega. That is where the problem comes in when you become a part of that particular thing. So I think you need to be very careful. And I think for us, I am in fact living only on my independent director's responsibility. Please remember, if I have a one bad apple, my entire thing, I will have to quit as a professional director on that account. So I think I need to be very careful on that account. So if you keep those kind of things in with you, you will be able to do right decisions of choosing right companies. That's what it is. And you should know when to quit, and quit with the right kind of reasons and right kind of rationally on that account. I keep all my minutes with me so that I know what I'm doing, and I'm insisting on making changes, and I put that thing in.
Okay, Radhika, we want to throw it open now to the audience.
Yes,
and then you can give the word of thanks.
Because, correct, yeah.
You can unmute all the participants. Whoever,
One moment. One moment.
you can unmute all participants, I guess. If Anna is there from IMC, Anna, can you unmute all the participants, please?
They have the ability to
Yeah.
speak right now.
Just let me see.
In fact, the participants also put in a question, we'll be able to, or else raise their hands and we can have it muted.
Yeah, I think so. We can do that also. But I think, I don't know.
Hello, Divya here, Divya Momaya. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, yes, yes.
Very much.
Very
Thank
much.
you. Yeah, in fact, wonderful interactions and great insights from all the panelists today. And I thank IMC for arranging such a wonderful initiative and wonderful, topic, which is very, very much need of the day. And it was really wonderful to listen all the insights from all the, the faculties and speakers here. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Are there any questions that?
I am Ajay Kapoor here. I have a question.
Yeah.
Which is,
Could you just speak a little louder?
okay.
Could you
Is
speak
it
a
better
little
now?
Yes, much better. Yes, much better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is actually on the other side of the pendulum that many of the boards do actually the opposite. That one is that one is the kind of companies where they keep the information to the minimum. The other is drown the board with information, right? So present 2,000 pages of information or put so much of information that it's next to impossible, and so it's the other extreme. So as an independent director, what advice you would give to individuals so that they can play the role effectively?
Nagesh, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I will take it. Good question. I think I will tell you, in my portfolio, I have many companies which are backed by regulators. I have RBI as a regulator. I have IRDA as a regulator. I NHB as a regulator. I also have, this SEBI as a regulator for the stock exchange related part. I'm on these many boards on that account. As you rightly said, basically, in all these kinds of regulated kind of entities, your documentation is very critical. And I think in that context, you have to see to it that your minutes, your, totally agenda, it should be very, very, voluminous. It will be voluminous, but you must have the ability to understand, to seep out what is relevant to you on that account. I will just give you one example. In a banking board, I get about 700 pages. It's all digital agenda, but I get about 700 to 800 pages for board and something like 600 pages for the audit committee related part. You have to study that. You have to spend enough time to do that particular part. And if you can't do that in regulated thing, don't take it up on that account. So I think it is necessary for you to know, not only as a, as an audit committee head or as a risk management person, you should know your own subject matter, but at the same time, you must know the business. And if you don't know that business, you will find it very difficult to deal with it. So first is you have to ask, the content should be comprehensive. Number one. Number two, it should come in time. It should be crisp. Otherwise, you have to insist on that particular part. And what I do is, over and above agenda, I ask them for an executive summary for every node, so that I know which one I need to read executive summary, which I need to read on a detailed note. And I think in next 1 or 2 board meetings, you get adjusted to it. For instance, I was never part of life insurance, but I am now on a life insurance company. Just 2 meetings and I am at par with other independent directors. So you have to do that exercise. And if you want to keep yourself agile, and this is very critical, you must know your own matter, which is like controls related part, finance related part. Over and above that, you know the business. Otherwise, none of your business to be on any of the boards. And please understand, and you don't forget, there is no free lunch. I'm very clear on that account. Because if you are going to get paid, you have to contribute back.
Any of the other participants have a question?
I think Divya has
Yeah.
a question.
Yes, I have a question exactly coming to the point of the preservation of the minutes and the documentation. Now, in this digital era, when the minutes are coming digitally, and if something goes wrong into the company, or if there is, the lack of trust between the independent director and the company, and the director resigns, so in such situation, usually the company's first thing they do is to discontinue their the softwares which they have provided to the directors. So in such situations, how do the directors protect themselves, or how do they keep the access to those minutes and records? So I don't think there is any regulatory provision clearly currently monitoring and guiding on this part.
Vikesh, you want to take that? You are grinning there, Vikesh.
Yeah.
Well, nothing beats the paper. Documentary evidence has to be stored. That's the rule for living on the boards. You can't just trust the digital. Digital can fail anytime. So paper proof has to be maintained with you. Or there's no other way you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, as Nagesh said, you get 700, 800 pages of minutes and the agendas. So how do you preserve those pages if we say that it's, it has to be into the physical form? So it's really confusing. I mean, I understand we live in the digital world, but how does someone, protect themselves in such situation?
I can answer you, Divya. I'll give you a real solution to it. First thing first.
Yeah.
You don't have to keep too many things with you. Where you have contentious issues, which you feel you need to address at later stage, you need to keep only those papers in that account. So if you're asking me, I am on about 8 to 9 boards. Do I keep minutes for all of them? First thing, I don't keep all of them. I know 1 or 2 contentious companies where something can come up. I keep that kind of thing with me in that regard. So I think you should have basic faith in everybody. Otherwise, don't get into that company at all. So when you are uncomfortable, do it.
Okay, Nagesh, I'll stretch that point a little bit. What if the other independent directors are not as smart as you? What would you suggest? You're smart enough to know what is contentious and what can prop up. What if other independent directors are not as smart as you?
I think if you are asking me, they should not be in that particular board. That's the way I'll put it across. Frankly, that is what it is. Because according to me, and this is where I think some good practices I will tell you, every good company will have terms of references for every of those committees. Audit committee, what it will do, risk, what it will do, NRC, what it will do, if you have a technology committee, what it will do. And then a good organization as an overall thing will say if there is some overlap, who will be held primarily responsible. So that chair of that particular committee has to take on that responsibility. So if you are going to have that kind of process, and I'm talking about a good board, I'm talking about that progressive board of Ram Charan. I am on quite a few of them where there is a clarity. This is risk will look at it. This is audit will look at it. And that chair of that person has to spend time on that particular part and be on control. And if he requires help, he can take help from the other independent directors. And that really helps brilliantly on that account. And I don't know how much it is, but for all my companies, I have WhatsApp group where we can share a lot of things if we feel uncomfortable on that account. And there are people who are willing to help you out. They are willing to mentor you. And mind you, mentoring has nothing to do with age. In fact, there is a reverse mentoring which helps you immensely on that account. So I think it all depends on how you look at it. Idea is to see to it that you are looking at overall welfare of the organization, that you are on the right track in that particular.
I think Ajay has got a question.
Thank you.
Ajay, you have a question. You raised your hand.
Am I audible?
Yeah, speak a little louder, please.
Okay. So no, question is related to the softwares only. So the leading softwares today, which are being adopted now by many companies, they have this issue that the agenda comes to you only on the software. It's not mailed to you. You do not have rights to either print it or to download it. And the minutes are also published in the same software. And as one of the person asking questions said, that once you cease to be a director, your access is withdrawn. So that is the position where the question is being asked about, because you can't keep record because the software will not permit you.
Smita, you
In
want to
fact,
take
going with the same question, with this respect, when you have notes, because now notes also you can write in the softwares. So once your access is gone, all your notes are gone, all your access is gone. So that becomes very critical situation. So any regulatory perspective, I mean, that needs to come up. That's what my ultimate question was, that it needs some change in the regulatory perspective as to how the directors can also protect themselves.
The Institute of Independent Directors can also raise a voice on this.
Yes, Vikesh ji, over to you, sir.
Yeah, no, these are the issues, but this being a legal matter, that if you have taken away all my entitlements to keep a record to myself, you cannot charge me for it. So the onus lies on the company. Swapnil might add to it instead of me, more appropriately. Swapnil ji, would you like to?
You see, when you are a director with a company, the records of that company are the company's property. Now, once you've resigned or you've left the company for whatever reasons it is, and if the company wants them back, I don't see a problem for you to hand it over to them, unless you want to keep it because you think that there might something crop up in the future and you may not have access to those things, or you may, I've often seen in some occasions where directors simply lie to the company saying that I haven't preserved anything because they were all soft copies or they were hard copies which I put it in the raddi somewhere, or I can't even locate it. And there's no way that you can, order some sort of a search and seizure warrant, search warrant to bhej nahi sakte na uske liye. So, like the way they do it on the income tax authorities or the enforcement directorate, ye to sawal hi nahi paida hota. So that is where I think, Vikesh, it all depends upon, how much the director, as Nagesh pointed out, if he's a really smart man, and if he thinks that somewhere one of these records is going to create a problem, and I may never have access to this to defend myself, then I may keep it. I mean, that's the only view that I can give. I think that's a fair call, I guess. Smita, you want to take that?
To add to that, Smita.
Yeah, sorry, Radhika, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just saying that one of the few of the important things that become relevant in times like this is, of course, one's notes that one has in terms of date and time. When we attended the meetings, what were the issues? Actually, like Nagesh says, if there are issues which one feels that could be contentious, or where you have one's dissent, and those have to be recorded with oneself obviously in safekeeping. Apart from that, also when independent directors have the right to be able to ask even minutes on an annual basis, copies of it if you wish, on certain meetings or certain important resolutions. So it is well within one's right to be able to ask for those records in any case, legally speaking.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You were saying something.
Yes, Smita, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was exactly saying this. You don't, something doesn't become important all of a sudden after a year and after you've resigned. So the idea is to ask for copies along the way, and if you feel so, preserve those copies. I mean, that's something I regularly do, and I say that please send me a hard copy of this, even though everything is digitized. If I feel something is important, I ask for a hard copy of it. And yes, I maintain my own notes. All Zoom meetings now are recorded. So the evidence of that is there. And I think, I ask to see the recording sometimes. If I'm not sure as to, whether the minutes actually reflect what was discussed and what were the decisions taken, you can ask to review the recording of the meeting as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any other questions from others? I think the class is over.
Yeah, so anyway, this has been truly a wonderful session, and the fact that everyone has so freely and openly shared their views, and meetings like this and interactions like this are really very important because they bring to us insights which come from years of experience, not just in terms of reading books, laws and others. So I'd like to thank on behalf of the IMC and the Corporate Law Committee, the legal committee of IMC, to all the eminent speakers who've been here. Thank you, Vikesh, and Nagesh and Smita for being here, sharing your thoughts and insights through all your experience. I'd like to also thank my co-host Swapnil, who always makes every session so full of energy and wonderful, because he has got a natural gift of the gab, as we all know it. I'd like a moment to thank our IMC team who's made this possible, all of them. First of all, the IMC legal committee itself, the board members of the IMC who helped us plan all of this, and the IMC team in terms of our IT and corporate communications, everyone who helped, and most of all the participants who have made this a great success. So thank you so much. On behalf of the IMC Law Committee, we thank you for having attended this session and look forward to many more such sessions. So thank you very much on behalf of the committee. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you
Vikesh,
very much,
Nagesh,
Swapnil.
and
Thank
Smita.
you, Radhika.
Most welcome. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Vikesh.
Nagesh. Thanks,
Thank you,
Smita.
Nagesh.
Sincerely
Bye.
appreciate.
Thank you. Thank you.